Before we start with this, I just wanted to point out something. So today's Yud Tes Kislev, which is the wedding day of the Rebbe and the Rebbetzin. And it's interesting that in Shulchan Aruch, you don't find anywhere that it says you can celebrate a wedding day. Nevertheless, the Rebbe encourages very much, similar to birthdays. In Shulchan Aruch, there's nothing there about celebrating birthdays, but the Rebbe encourages very much. And explained that it's one of those things that maybe years ago, there wasn't a need to emphasize it, but today there is. And not only that, but the Rebbe also marked off, in general society, people mark off dates like this, the 25th anniversary, the 50th anniversary. And the Rebbe did the same on the 25th anniversary. The Rebbe had a special farbrengen, and he said a mimer, and he edited a mimer, which in those days was very, very unusual. And then the 50th year, the Rebbe made a very big issue. And basically, it's all about taking things that go on out in the world, which is nothing wrong with it, it's just worldly, and taking it and using it to enhance our Avodas Hashem. So you take a day like a wedding, and you take the time off to celebrate and thank Hashem, and make hachlatas to do things in the future that are even better than the year before. That's using this date to serve Hashem better. Of course, the question comes up that, okay, this makes sense when the people are celebrating, but now we're talking about a time where the Rebbe, physically they're not here with us. What's the point in celebrating? But the truth is, anything that happens in Jewish way of life and Torah way of life is eternal. It's forever, and it has spiritually. There's something that happened on the day of Yud Tes Kislev, and that's something which repeats itself every single year. So I wanted to show you the year Tavshin Nun Beis. That's the year that the Rebbe had the stroke, and a lot of very unusual things happened that year, because the Rebbe did things that he never did before. And one of them was that in a very unusual way, he gave out, he distributed different things, much more than usual. And one of them was this was on Yud Tes Kislev. It was actually a few days later, but it was an honor Yud Tes Kislev. This is called Drushi Chasana. What it is all the Maimorim that the previous Rebbe said at the Rebbe's wedding. So this is something which was printed years ago, and it's called the Maimorim of the wedding. But the Rebbe took this in a plastic bag like this, put in $2 with tzedakah. If I'm not mistaken, it was also a honey cake for lekach, which again is very unusual. Honey cake is a custom that you distribute at Erev Yom Kippur. That year, the Rebbe distributed honey cake a few times. After a few months later, in the month of Adar, when the Rebbe had the stroke, we all looked back at all the changes and all the differences, and we saw clearly how the Rebbe was preparing bracha for the time period that we're going to be going through. So this is what the Rebbe gave out. As usual, it was only for those that are there. It wasn't for anyone to take it, to send it off to anyone else, but it was given to everybody, men, women, children, infants, everybody, even a little tiny infant got this sefer with the dollars. And just to say one word about it is that in Chassidus, it talks a lot about Pashas Chayesara, where we have the marriage of Eliezer going as an agent of Avraham Avinu to make the marriage between Yitzchak and Rivka. And the story of how everything came about is repeated 3 times. And the Gemara asks, how is it that there's so many halachas that we know the halacha from the Torah, because the Torah adds an extra letter That's all. One letter, and that teaches the halacha. Another letter there teaches another halacha, or 10 halachas, because the Torah is very precise. There's not one extra letter. It's definitely not an extra word. Over here, there's extra sentences, almost parshas, full, repeating the story. Instead of saying, this is what happened, or saying, Eliezer told them what had happened, he repeats the whole story all over again. How he came into the place, and he was thinking to Hashem, give me a sign. So Chassidus explains how a wedding down here is husband and wife getting together, but a man is connected to, in the spiritual realm. In the spheres, there's also male and female. Male is Zoh, and female is Malchus. And just like down here, through husband and wife coming together, they create a family and generations. Lamaila, when the Zoh and Malchus merge, that creates new light. And in fact, according to Chassidus and Kabbalah, every single time we observe a mitzvah, that's what we're doing. We're causing a merger between Zoh and Malchus. And because there are so many millions and billions and trillions of different levels of Zoh and Malchus, each mitzvah that every person does affects the spiritual realm in a different place. But when we daven in the morning, before Baruch Shamar, we say, L'shem yichud kutchabrichu shchinte. We're now going to unite HaKadosh Baruch Hu and his Shekhinah. That's what it means. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the masculine realm in the spiritual realm. Shekhinah is the feminine. And by saying, by davening, we're causing a merger between these two realms. And the same happens with every single mitzvah that we perform. So when there's a wedding down here, that means there's a wedding up there. There's a merger up there. The source of the man and the source of the woman, but especially the wedding of Yitzhak and Rivka, because they were the Avos. So that merger had an effect, well, it's explained in Chassidus, on all the Torah and all the mitzvahs and all the future uniting Zoh and Malchus and all future generations. And that's why the Torah talks about it so much. So the same is with every wedding, and especially the wedding of a tzaddik or a nasi, that it's something which has an effect on the whole generation. And spiritually, whatever happened that first time is repeated, it reoccurs every single year on that date. And we'll have speakers that'll be speaking more about it. But you know what the Rebbe said about this day is that this is the day that made the bond between me and the Chassidim, and the Chassidim and the Rebbe. So it's also to remember that the Chassidim and Rebbe relationship is not just academic. The Rebbe teaches us, the Rebbe guides us, but it's also a relationship of like a parents to children. It's a relationship of love. And the Chassid, anything that is important to the Rebbe, anything that gives the Rebbe pleasure, gives the Chassid pleasure. If it's the Rebbe's occasion of Simcha, it's the Chassid's occasion of Simcha. So this is a day of celebration for Chassidim around the world. And there are a lot of details, things that happened at the wedding. There's a booklet that we prepared that you could read of a certain chassid who was at the wedding, and he wrote a diary. Not only was at the wedding, he was a chassid that was sort of the shadchan, and he was a chassid that was the Rebbe's shomer, and the chassid has to be walking with someone all the time. So he accompanied the Rebbe the whole time. His name was Rabbi Altois. And this is his diary of things that he observed during the time of the wedding. So we'll go back to the story of Yud Tes Kislev, where we're up to. Where are we up to? Let's see. The place where the Alter Rebbe was arrested is in an island. And whenever they needed to bring the Alter Rebbe in for questioning in front of the court, they took him with a little boat to the mainland, and they went back with a little boat. Being that the Alter Rebbe was there for for 2 months almost, close to 2 months. And he was arrested after Yontif. So naturally, the next month is the time to make the bracha on the new moon. And they were going with the boat at night. So Alter Rebbe asked the captain of the boat to stop the boat so he can make the bracha on the new moon. When it comes to davening, if you're in a vehicle, it's always better to stop the vehicle if you can and daven, because you could be more concentrated when the car, the vehicle, the boat, whatever it is stationary. So he asked him to stop it so that he could make the bracha on the new moon. Naturally, the captain did not want to accommodate. The Alter Rebbe said, if you're not going to stop it, I could stop it myself, which he probably thought was a joke. But then something broke, and the boat stopped. And they called the mechanics, and they just couldn't fix it. But finally, he realized that the Alter Rebbe was serious. He stopped the boat himself. So the Alter Rebbe said to him, so if I'll ask you to stop it now, would you stop it? He said, yes. And the boat started to move again. And then he stopped it. And the Alter Rebbe did the bracha and Kiddush L'Bana. This was explained by the other Rabbeim, like why did he have to do that? Once the boat stopped, he should have made the bracha on the new moon. Why doesn't he need his favor now to stop it? He stopped it already himself. And the answer is that the whole purpose of Torah mitzvahs, oh, thank you, is not as Ruach HaKodesh. She hears what we're saying. So these are the booklets. You want to give it out? Someone wants to take it, put it out on the tables. Thank you. The whole purpose of creation of the world is that Eibishter wanted a dwelling place in this physical, natural world. So therefore, the objective is to do Torah mitzvahs in a natural way. If the Alter Rebbe would stop the boat in a supernatural way and then make the bracha, then in a sense, it wouldn't be the ultimate purpose of avodah in this world. So the Alter Rebbe wanted the boat to be stopped in a natural way. So first he stopped it in a supernatural way, so the captain should respect his request. But then he wanted the captain should stop it in a natural way. This captain was no fool. When he saw who the Alter Rebbe is, he asked him for a bracha. He's smart. Now that he sees the Alter Rebbe is a tzaddik, he asked him for a bracha. And the Alter Rebbe gave him a bracha that he should be promoted in his position, and he should have a long life, and he should have a lot of wealth. And the bracha was fulfilled. And there's a chassid, his name was Rabbi Wolf. He was actually the Rav in the city where the Rebbe was born, near Katrinaslav. And he said that he met the son of this captain, and he had the Alter Rebbe's handwritten bracha to this person, had it in a gold or silver frame. So, no, I'll leave that for later. He asked the Alter Rebbe 22 questions that he needed to answer to explain the path of Chassidus. But one of the questions, or maybe that was the first question, was, is he a follower of the Baal Shem Tov? And apparently it was all based on their false accusation that Chas v'Shalom, the Baal Shem Tov, deviated from the way of Torah, and he's a follower of the Baal Shem Tov. And the Alter Rebbe said, had he answered on the first question that he's not a follower of the Baal Shem Tov, they would have released him from jail right then and there. But he didn't want to disconnect himself from the Baal Shem Tov, even for one moment, even just if it's in speech, not sincere, but not in any level that he wanted to do something which would disconnect him from the Baal Shem Tov. And the Alter Rebbe said that the whole process was a very spiritually painful process. They were asking questions about God. They were asking philosophical questions. The Alter Rebbe had to explain in Yonim of Chassidus to them, which the Alter Rebbe said, you can imagine these are people with coarse minds, coarse way of looking at things, and I have to explain to them the concepts of Chassidus. Let's remember, this was over 200 years ago. This was a time where even Yidden to study Chassidus was a novel idea. Imagine, I have to explain these ideas to these non-Jews who were running the courts. But nevertheless, that's what had to be done. And by doing that, the Alter Rebbe was able to satisfy them with their questions. And one of the questions they asked the Alter Rebbe was, why does he write in Tanya that the souls of non-Jews comes from Sholosh Klibos Atmeis? It's a loaded question in a non-Jewish environment. So Alter Rebbe didn't answer them, he just smiled. And then they said, okay, let's go to the next question. So later the Alter Rebbe said that what he meant by smiling was, listen, you saw that I answered all the questions to your satisfaction. You understood it, it made perfect sense to you. You don't really want me to explain this to you, right? So let's skip it. So they got the message and they said, okay, let's skip it. They didn't go into it. It's interesting that you probably know that once upon a time in Crown Heights, 1991, there were riots here. And riots. What is that? Was there riots? No. And what happened was there was an accident. The Rebbe was coming back from the oil, and there was a car behind the Rebbe that always followed the Rebbe's car. And there was an accident. The car crashed into a non-Jewish child, and the child got killed. And they said this was done intentionally. It was just a mamish, a false accusation, like the old blood libels. And they were riding in the streets, and eventually, unfortunately, they killed someone. This is happening too often. Must be a lot of bracha coming. I'm sorry. Devorah, what kavanah did you have when you put the water in? Maybe it wasn't the right kavanah. You have to think about mayim and what it's not. Yeah, blame it on her, right? So naturally, this was in the news, and the whole world was talking about it. It was global news. But unfortunately, at that time, there were some people who were not friends of Orthodox Jews, or a certain rabbi, Reform rabbi, conservative rabbi, in order to enhance their argument against Chabad. He said, "No, Chabad, they've been racist since the beginning." And he quoted what it says in Tanya, that there's a difference between the souls of Jews and the souls of non-Jews. But that's what happened over here, that apparently the opposition, they wrote that the Alter Rebbe writes things, and the Alter Rebbe said, we don't need to explain that. During the time that the Alter Rebbe was in jail, the Alter Rebbe's family, naturally, they were devastated, and they fasted every single day. And every single day, a minyan, 10 people went to the oil of Rebbetzin Dvorah Leah. Rebbetzin Dvorah Leah was the daughter of the Alter Rebbe. And she was the mother of the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Rebbe of Chabad. And she gave up her life for the Alter Rebbe. That's a story in itself. That there was a point where the Alter Rebbe told his daughter that this year he's going to have to leave the world because of his spreading Chassidus. There's a prosecution against him in the heavenly court, and he won't be able to live anymore to spread Chassidus. And he spoke to her about it. And there's a long story how she did this, but she chose to substitute the Alter Rebbe, and shortly after she passed away, and the Alter Rebbe continued to live for many more years. So her son, the Tzemach Tzedek, in a sense, was raised by the Alter Rebbe, by her father, and then he became the third Rebbe of Chabad. And then following that, all the Rebbes of Chabad came from her son, from the Alter Rebbe. So every day a minyan would go to the oil, her oil, Rebbetzin Dvorah Leah, and they wrote down on a piece of paper everything that had happened. And they said that they're a bezdin, and they're a sort of, by oath, they're obligating her to go to the chamber of the Baal Shem Tov and the Mezritcha Magid, because the Alter Rebbe is having Mesiras Nefesh for their teachings, to go and tell them the Alter Rebbe should be released from jail, and the whole episode should not have an effect on his health. And basically, they say that the strongest person, everybody else was falling apart. The strongest person in the family was the Alter Rebbe's mother. Her name was Rivka, as we learned before. And she was the one that was sort of giving everybody strength and encouragement. One day, it was like a few days before Yud Tes Kislev, the Middle Rebbe fainted. Remember, I told you that in general, he had a weak heart and a weak lung. So when he got very aggravated, he fainted. And when the Alter Rebbe's mother saw that, she said to him, I swear to you that my father came to me in a dream, and he told me that this week your father's going out of jail. Normally, she wouldn't have revealed it to him, but because she saw that he's becoming sick, so she told that to him. That was the week that the Alter Rebbe went out of jail. Now, as I said before, the Alter Rebbe said that it was very painful to him to take these deep concepts of Chassidus and explain it to them. Really, the Alter Rebbe performed so many miracles. Why couldn't he perform another miracle? Just go out of jail. Imagine, remember the story with the wagon? He stopped the wagon. Now he stopped the boat. So if he's really in charge, he could have just walked out of the jail. And you do this miracle, why can't he make another miracle happen? So there's a lot of explanation to this in the Sikhs of the previous Rebbe, that tzaddikim, when they go through something, they go through it with their own agreement. In other words, they see that there's a heavenly divine purpose and there's a reason, and therefore they go through it. And what's behind this? So it's interesting, the Alter Rebbe gave instructions about 10 Chassidim that under no circumstances should they come to Petersburg. Why not? So Alter Rebbe said if these 10 would come together to Petersburg, they'd burn the place down. Now it doesn't mean they were terrorists and they'd come there with torches of fire. These were all Chassidim of a great tzaddik, each one in their own right. And with their davening, they would just, something would happen that would destroy Petersburg, and Alter Rebbe would go out of jail. And he didn't want to go out of jail in this kind of miraculous way. He wanted to go out of jail in a natural way, because everything has to go through the channels of nature. So he wanted them to ask questions, to give answers. Their minds and their coarse minds should be satisfied with the answers. And they, from their perspective, should be the ones to say, you are free and you can continue to spread Chassidus. That was part of the divine purpose of this whole event. So we find later, there was and this is a discussion that needs a lot of time and a lot of classes, but I'll just mention it briefly. We know that the Mezritcha Magid had 120 close students. What I mean by close is he had thousands of followers, but he had 120 Talmidim, that each one was a giant of a tzaddik in his own right. And they were the ones who became later the Hasidic masters that spread Chassidus. It's interesting, Baal Shem Tov had 60 such students, and the Magid had double. They had 120, exactly double. And one of the ways to remember it, I mean, the Rebbe said this, is in the davening we have a pasuk, Hine mitase shel Shlomo, here is Shlomo Melech's bed, Shishim Giberim, there's 60 mighty men surrounding him and protecting him. And the Baal Shem Tov had 60 Talmidim that were great spiritual giants. And the Magid had 120. Out of all the Talmidim of the Magid, most of them did not agree with the Alter Rebbe. They felt that he's revealing Chassidus too much, and it's going too far. And in fact, I think it says that only 12 of the 120 were supportive of the Alter Rebbe. Like Rabbi Yitzchak of Berditchev, Rabbi Zusha of Anapol, Rabbi Melech of Lezhensk, the Shpagel Zayda. There's 10 tzaddikim that they were with, the others were not. One of them that was in opposition to the Alter Rebbe, his name was Rabbi Baruch of Mezhebush. So he was a grandson of the Baal Shem Tov. And one time he and the Alter Rebbe met. And this was after the Alter Rebbe went out of jail. And Rabbi Baruch, was saying what he thinks, and he's upset at the Alter Rebbe. And the Alter Rebbe said, you shouldn't be upset at me, you should be thanking me. I had Mesiras Nefesh for your grandfather. I was in jail. So Baruch said, if I was arrested, I would give a few puffs on my pipe. The Rabbeim used to smoke pipes. I would give a few puffs on my pipe, burn the place down, and go home. Who told you to sit there for 53 days? So the Alter Rebbe said that when Yaakov was confronted by Esav, he also could have done the same thing. This is Alter Rebbe's words, could have taken his hand, moved it over his forehead, and Esav and his 400 men would just disappear. But he wanted to confront Esav and defeat Esav in a natural way. So he prepared with gifts, he prepared with other ways. So this is a general key difference between Chabad and other Hasidim, which is something we have to talk about more, that other Hasidim are much more into doing things through miracles. And in Chabad, the approach is much more to do things, even if it's a miracle, but the miracle should be channeled through the natural order. So the Alter Rebbe's going out of jail was a miracle, without a question. But the miracle was channeled through the natural order in the sense that they prevented their arguments, and the court understood, and the court agreed. And eventually, it wasn't that there was some miracle the Alter Rebbe escaped from the jail, but that the authorities who arrested him came to the realization that it's okay, and they gave him the green light to go ahead and continue with spreading Chassidus. Now, if you remember, we said that when the Alter Rebbe ate the food, and they asked him, who's eating my food? He wrote down on a note, it is me. Someone should immediately go to Vilna. So the Vilna was one of the headquarters where the opposition, they had committees that got together, they had meetings, and they were the most active in the war against Chassidim. So he had no idea why he's going there, what he's supposed to accomplish, but if the Alter Rebbe said to go there, he figured he will already find out why he has to be there. So he went to Vilna, sat down in the Beis Medrash, sat down with a sefer, but in the meantime, his ears were open listening to conversations. Maybe he'll pick up something that's important for him to know, something that's being planned. And after being there for a few days, he found what it was. Remember, we said that one of the arguments against the Alter Rebbe was that in his Hasidic teachings, he puts down Malchus, royalty. And he says that it's the lowest of all the spheres, which is, of course, a joke because it's not the Alter Rebbe. This is Kabbalah. This is from the Arizal, from the Zohar. It's from way back when. It's from way back when. And therefore, the argument was just an absolute false accusation. There was nothing that could be done. It's a false accusation. And the Alter Rebbe said, I will explain it, but I can't explain it verbally. I'll explain what Malchus is all about. I'll explain it in writing. I'll write it in Hebrew, and you'll get a translator that'll translate it into Russian. And that's what they did. So in Vilna, that was the place where the person who was the official authorized translator for the Russian government. And they sent it to him to translate. And now he picked up from a conversation that they're going to this translator, they're going to give him a lot of money and convince him to change some of the words in the translation, which instead of being a defense for the Alter Rebbe would turn out to be something against the Alter Rebbe. So that's what happened. He went to the translator and he told him what he heard, and he's begging him and pleading with me. The Alter Rebbe is an innocent person. He's a great tzaddik. So the translator said, okay, they were here already. They were here yesterday. And they asked me to do this. And I told them I don't want to. I'm an honest person. I like to do my work honestly. And they begged and they pleaded and they explained how important it is. It'll help the Jewish people. It'll help the whole world. I told them to come tomorrow. So I hear everything you're saying. And I promise you, I won't do such a thing. But if you want to be convinced that my promise is true, come here tomorrow before they come. I'll put you in a room on the side. I won't see you. And you can hear the conversation. So he came 11 o'clock and they were supposed to come 12 o'clock. And after he talked to him about the Alter Rebbe and his greatness and the false accusation, he went into the room and then they walked in. And he heard them saying that he brought 3,000 ruble, which is an enormous sum of money in those days. And he said, I want to be honest. And they said, but it's a big mitzvah. You'll be getting rid of evil in this world, and you'll have reward in this world, and you'll have reward in the next world, on and on and on. And finally he said, okay, I'll do it. and they left. Come back tomorrow, and I'll show you what I wrote up, the changes that I made. When he heard these words, the chassid, he was locked in the room. He couldn't do anything. He waited till they left, and he came out and he started crying and begging and pleading. And he said, "Do you think I'm really going to do it? Would I ask you to be here behind the door to listen? I only said it to them so they should get off my back. I'm going to write 2 letters. One is going to be the true, authentic translation, and the other one will be to satisfy them. I'll show you both letters, and the one that I'm going to send to Petersburg will be the authentic one. So you can be here tomorrow. I'll show you the letter. In fact, you can walk with the person to the post office to see that he's putting into the mail the right letter." And that's what happened. So now we understood why the Alter Rebbe told him to go to Vilna, because to prevent them from doing something which would have been a distortion, and it would have been Chas v'Sholom, prove that the Alter Rebbe himself writes something against the government. But if instead, on the contrary, he said he wrote a note of his own after he finished reading it. The Alter Rebbe is actually a patriot of the government, and he only encourages people to be loyal to their governments, which is true according to Torah. So after that, he was hanging around Vilna a little bit longer, and then he left. When the time came for the Alter Rebbe to go out of jail, he asked the Alter Rebbe, where does he want to go? Apparently, the protocol was when they release a person from jail, they take him out of the jail and they bring him to his house. But the Alter Rebbe didn't live in Petersburg. So where does he want to go? So he said he wants to go to the house of Rav Mordechai Lepler. That's the one we mentioned before. He gave the food. He lived in Petersburg. And by the way, they say that this chassid was a Beinani of Taina. Even though he was a businessman, but he reached the level of Beinani. So the Chassidim already heard the news. It looks like the Alter Rebbe is going to be freed. They didn't know exactly when. And then they heard that he's going to be freed this day. And they took the Alter Rebbe to the house of Rav Mordechai Lepler. But where he lived, there was a little technical problem. The technical problem was that Rav Mordechai Lepler lived downstairs. And on top of him, the next floor was someone who was from the opposition. And not only from the opposition, apparently he was also instrumental in getting the Alter Rebbe arrested. So the guards, instead of taking the Alter Rebbe to the right apartment, they took him to the other apartment. And when that person opened the door, he was in shock. Like, what are you doing here? You're out of jail? But they shoved the Alter Rebbe into his apartment, and he locked the door, and he kept the Alter Rebbe hostage there. In the meantime, the Chassidim went to the jail, and they said, no, he was released. They went to the house, he never came here. And something wasn't right. So for 3 hours, they were running back and forth, trying to figure out what happened to the Alter Rebbe. In the meantime, the Alter Rebbe was there, and this person was screaming at the Alter Rebbe and basically humiliating the Baal Shem Tov, degrading the Mezritcher Maggid, degrading Chassidus, of course, the Alter Rebbe himself. And he raised his voice. So at one point, when they came back to check, maybe he came to the apartment, they heard from upstairs someone screaming, who told you to change the davening? Why did you have to change this? And they realized the Alter Rebbe must be there. And they went up, they knocked on the door, he wouldn't open. So they said to him, if you don't open the door will disappear by itself somehow. So he opened the door, and they found the Alter Rebbe sitting with his hand like this. And he was what we call today physical abuse. Just the Alter Rebbe said later that the 3 hours that he spent in this person's house was more painful to him than all the 53 days of the suffering that he had in the Russian jail. Because to hear words coming out of the mouth of your own brother, you're another Jew, such degrading words against the Baal Shem Tov, the Maggid, Chassidus, and everything that's related to it was extremely painful, and it was worse than all the 53 days. So this is the reason why we celebrate the 19th of Kislev and the 20th of Kislev. The 19th of Kislev is when the Alter Rebbe went out of jail, but he went out towards the evening. So when he went out of this person's house, it was already the 20th of Kislev. So it's a yontif just like the 19th. And it's also connected to something regarding the printing of Tanya. But I just want to conclude because we don't have the time for that, so I'll continue that part tomorrow. But at the end, the person said, and the Alter Rebbe said, after everything that happened, the Alter Rebbe said, 10 covered lachsanya. You're supposed to give honor to your host, being that he was my host for the last 3 hours. So I'll drink a cup of tea. So then the person poured a cup of tea to the Alter Rebbe, and then when the Alter Rebbe left, that's when he told the Chassidim how what you did for me, you saved me from this person, which is more than the 53 days that I was in jail. There was something that happened with the printing of the Tanya. Now the Alter Rebbe said if that wouldn't have happened, he wouldn't have had to go through this suffering for these 3 hours. So what's that? I guess to be continued tomorrow. Yep. Okay.